What's up, everybody? We're back for another episode of Common Sense Garage, and I know we said we were talking about automotive tools, automotive hand tools, how to fix your cars, how to fix a motorcycle, but there's also times when you're working in the yard, especially in the summertime, where you have a piece of equipment that is gas powered that may need some extra TLC or extra attention. So what we have here today is a Troy-bilt weed eater that is a 4-cycle engine on it, which means that it takes separate gas and oil. Most of your weed eaters are 2-cycle engines, which means that the gas and the oil has been mixed together to give you a ratio. You can normally look in your owner's manual to tell whether or not you have a 4-cycle engine or a 2-cycle engine, and mix the gas respectively to those recommendations by the manufacturer. So today what we have in this little piece of equipment is the customer has said that it doesn't pick up fuel whenever she primes it to try and get it to start. It's very hard to start. It's very hard to get any fuel up into the carburetor to allow it to start. She's already changed spark plugs. She's already changed filters. She's already done a lot of other things that normal troubleshooting would tell you to do. And so we have officially got down to where it is the fuel lines inside of the gas tank. So I'm hoping to get some pretty detailed shots, because I've looked all over YouTube and I haven't found anybody who's willing to show you how to change out the fuel lines on a weed eater, on this particular weed eater. So hang with me and we'll get started right after this. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Rosie's Diner, Ride to Live. If you have a motorcycle or know anybody that has one, make sure you get out to Rosie's Diner. Located at 123 Your Mama's House, she has the best cube steak in town. You'll love to meet her, so make sure you come on out to Rosie's Diner. So first things first, let's go over the tools that you're going to need for this job. So here you see I have a set of a wrench, a ratchet with a screwdriver with a 1/4-inch bit adapter to it. I have several bits over here. I also have some Torx bits in this little case here, in which you're going to need in order to get some of the screws out of this top cover and to be able to work around the fuel tank. I also have a pair of what I call, and this may not be the proper term, but I've always called them this. It's a pair of dikes. Side cutters is a more proper term for them. I'm not going to get into the reason why they call them dikes. I'm sure some people, maybe even Peacock, has an opinion on that, but we won't express those right now. You get the idea. You also may need a magnetic tray. This is always great to have around whenever you're working on small metal parts, because the tray will help them from getting scattered all over the shop. Now, if you don't have a shop, even more of a reason for you to have a magnetic tray. They're very inexpensive at your local automotive parts store or big name box store. I won't name any names because, like I told you before, I'm not getting sponsored by anybody. If they want to sponsor me, then we'll talk about getting their name out there for you. But I'm sure you can do a little bit of research even on the big search engines. Yeah, you thought you were going to get me there, didn't you? On the big search engine, and you can find these relatively cheap. But if you don't have a shop and you're out in the middle of your yard or on a picnic table that you're working on this thing on, you don't want to lose those screws, because they're very important that everything gets put back in its place, because they're in that place for a reason. So make sure you get all the screws put back in and tightened down. But while you have the screws out, this tray will hold it. And you can see it holds it fairly well. That's a screw in the center of it, and that screw's not going anywhere. It also has magnets on the bottom that will attach to a metal table if you have one. But if you don't, like I said, just keep it with you so you can keep everything kind of organized and out of the way so you don't accidentally spill it and lose one. All right, guys, so here's the Troy-bilt weed eater again. And so what we're looking at today, whatever time it is in which you are watching this video, we are looking at the gas tank itself. So inside the gas tank, once you remove the lid, there are two fuel lines. One of those fuel lines is the pickup, which should stay submerged in fuel for the entire time that there is fuel in the tank. And the other one is the primer pickup, which whenever you press this little bulb right here, and I'll get some detailed shots for you, it picks up fuel so that it primes the carburetor so that you can have fuel in the carburetor when you pull the rope to start it. So what we're running into is a lot of times the fuel lines, after years of sitting in fuel, will age and become rotted or dry rotted. The fuel breaks down the plastic. Why somebody hasn't already come up with the idea or the chemical makeup to change these hoses so that fuel doesn't degrade them, I haven't figured it out. But if you know of a fuel line that doesn't degrade over time, please leave it in the comments. Let me know, because I have plenty of power equipment at my disposal and I'm all the time changing fuel lines or primer bulbs because they have become dry rotted and they just tear up. So make sure you leave that in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe to this video, to this channel, not just to this video, you know, that would be weird, but like and subscribe to the channel. And make sure you share this thing. Share this content, get it out there for people to see, because we're non-judgmental around here. We don't care what background you come from. We don't care where you came from, how much knowledge you have, or how little knowledge you have. We want to make sure that you look smarter in 2020, right? Because that's what we're all about. So let's dive right into this thing. So we've talked about the tools. Now let's get down to some brass tacks, some business end of getting this thing tore apart. So you may be asking, Mark, how do I tear a weed eater apart? Well, it's a lot simpler than you might think. Yeah, you see a whole bunch of plastic over the cover, over the engine and everything else. Don't let that deter you. It's usually held on by some clips or some screws. It all depends on the manufacturer that you have. So I'm going to start taking these things off, and once we get it down to where you need to see, I'll kind of slow this thing back down so that you're not here for the entire night like I am. So as you can see, there were two bolts in the back, here and here. Those are the ones that I took off down here and laid in the tray. And there was also one at the front, as you can see right here. Now I'll show you whenever I put everything back together where these bolts exactly are, and I'll get some close-up shots, but just want to let you know. As you can see, this fuel line has already come off and it goes to the primer bulb. The other one has actually snapped off because it was dry rotted. I don't know if you guys can see that. Hopefully you can. There you go. So it's very important that you keep the right hose on the right side of the primer bulb. Believe you me, I've done it before myself. I've swapped them out and it's not a good thing. I promise it's not a good thing, because what happens is you end up priming the bulb, and instead of putting fuel into the carburetor, you actually pull it out. And whenever you start to run the engine, it will starve for fuel and shut itself off. A lot of headache, pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling. Trust me, you don't want to go that route. So make sure you keep track of which side the line goes on and what line goes on which side of this primer bulb. All right, so as you can see, and let me zoom in just a little bit more for you here. So the other side of this line that broke off is right here, and it actually attaches to the bottom side of the carburetor. Now, in order for you to properly change out both fuel lines, it's imperative that you probably go ahead and pull the carburetor off. It'll just make your life a whole lot easier. Now, I know there's some of you guys out there who are going to say, but Mark, if I pull the carburetor off, I have to replace the gaskets in between the manifold and the carburetor, and I don't really want to spend the money on that. They're $2, guys. $3 at most. Go out and buy you some new gaskets. It's always a good idea to change those gaskets whenever you pull them off. Now, for our situation here, because I don't have those gaskets readily available, you're going to notice that I don't replace the gaskets. But I'm going to be super careful whenever I pull these gaskets off and pull this carburetor off that I don't tear this gasket. Because the last thing you want, oh my, I've seen it so many times, that you tear the gasket and it runs like crud. The whole engine runs like crud because it's leaking air around the manifold. And whenever extra air is introduced into the circuit, because you need 3 things for an engine to run: air, fuel, and spark. 3 things: air, fuel, spark. Those are the 3 things that you need for an engine to run, a combustion engine to run. If you don't have those 3 things, or you're missing one of those 3 things, guess what? You're going to have a no-go. You're going to be pulling and pulling and pulling, be sweating profusely, out of breath, think that you're out of shape, need to join a gym. It's not your fault. Find out what one of the 3 things you're missing. Sometimes it may be multiples. You know, it may be 2 out of the 3 things you're missing. But start with checking your spark. This is the spark plug for this engine. If I happen to know that this engine was running last season, and I go and I prime it and I pull the cord and it doesn't start, after a couple times of pulling it, the first thing I'm going to check is this spark plug. Well, let me back up. The first thing I'm going to check is the fuel. Is there any fuel in the gas tank? Because I've seen it 100 times. People are so incredibly dumb whenever it comes to things like this. Check the fuel first. It could be as simple as you being out of fuel. Check it first. Once I've checked the fuel and know that I have fuel in it, the next thing I'm going to check, yep, you guessed it, is the spark plug, to make sure that it's not fouled out. So the way to do this, I don't want to get into all this because I'm simply here changing the fuel lines tonight, but you guys need to know. You guys, yeah, right there. So to check the spark plug, all you have to do is remove the spark plug cap, the wire. It snaps off, and then you can get you a wrench or a socket, whatever you have that can easily get down over this, to take it out. Once you take it out, you'll see the electrode in it, the other end of the spark plug that sticks into the engine. You can put the cap back on the spark plug. Don't hold it. It will shock you when you pull the cord. I've done it myself before. It's okay. People laughed. I didn't laugh so much because it hurt, but people laughed. Pull the spark plug out, lay it against something metal that's on the block itself, on the engine itself. It could be on the head of the engine, it could be on the exhaust of the engine, on a bolt that's attached to the engine. Lay it on there and pull the cord a couple times. And you'll notice you'll see a spark come out of that spark plug. If you do, you're all good. Put the spark plug back in, put the cap back on. You know it's not spark. You know it's not fuel. Well, what else do you need? Air, right? So then I would check the air filter. I would make sure there's no obstructions in the air filter or into the carburetor or anything like that. And I'd also check all the gaskets on the carburetor to make sure none of those are torn or inducing air into the circuit. If all those were good, I'm probably going to check what we're here to do tonight. And that's those fuel lines. Those pesky little fuel lines. It's amazing that something that small can cause so much trouble, but it happens. So we're going to tear this carburetor apart, get it off, get it laid to the side, and then I'll get back to you. Probably can. It'll still run.
You don't tire the gas, you'll get it.
Yep.
Done that 100 times myself.
All right, so as you can see, there's your fuel line on the bottom of the carburetor. Right there. That's your fuel line on the bottom of the carburetor. You notice that it's a different color from the other side of the primer bulb. It's actually a yellow color, and the other side of the primer bulb is a green color. Like I said, keep in mind, you got to keep those in the right position. So the one that goes on the carburetor is actually a yellow hose. Now, what we've done is we went to the local big box store, and we bought fuel line. You can see that it's a 16th ID, 1/8 OD, and about 1 foot long. You won't need that, quite that length, but we'll show you how to cut it off. And as you can see, there are 2 different colors in this pack. They make these things childproof. All right, so like I said, as you can see, 2 different colors, yellow and like a lighter blue color, whitish lighter blue. But if you notice that I'm like moving around weirdly, it's because my screen on my camera is upside down, and I'm trying to figure out where you guys are, trying to orient myself, but it'll be okay. We'll work it out. We'll make it happen. We'll make it happen, Captain. So on the other side of this carburetor, there's actually another hose. I don't know if you guys can see down in there or not. Right down here at the bottom. So I've got to get that hose off as well. This is just a little spacer. Just a little spacer for the carburetor itself. Make sure you keep the right orientation for that spacer. So the hose simply just comes right off. It's right here. Right there on that hole right there, that's where the hose comes off at. And you see our other hose is still attached. I have not removed it yet. So I've got to get down into here, because that's where all of our hoses are, the remainder part of our hoses. So I'm going to take the fuel cap off. And if we look down inside of there, yeah, you can see in there. All right. So you see a hose back there at the back, at the very back, that has a filter on it. That's the hose that picks the fuel up, that needs to stay submerged in fuel the entire time. Now there's another barb that's right back there at the top. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but the let's see if we can get a little bit lighter. There you go. So you see that barb way back here at the back. That actually attaches to that blue hose up here on the top. So what we want to do is we want to try and get those out of that tank. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, that's where the fun part comes in. Well, that one's got a, it did have a hose barb. It's down there in the fuel now. So I don't think I'm gonna replace the main one. You know what I'm talking about? The black one that attaches to the back, because it's still good. Yeah, that's the one with the filter on it, so it's still good. There ain't nothing to it. Because I don't want this piece of hose that's in here. I don't want it to Ah! It's like fishing for something. All right, guys, so this right here will cause you a whole lot of heartache if you don't get it out of that fuel tank, because that can clog up a fuel filter very quickly. So anytime you drop anything, make sure you get it out of the fuel tank. There's a barb in there that this hose was attached to that I'm gonna try and get as well. So I'm just using a small coat hanger, a small piece of wire. You see I've got a little hook bent onto it. That wasn't part of our tools originally, but a piece of wire, any type of wire, comes in handy very easily around the shop. So make sure you have you some wire, copper wire, aluminum wire, fence wire, it doesn't really matter, just something that you can bend. A coat hanger, like I said, a coat hanger works just as well. As you can see, there's a little bit of a bend on it. So I've got to get this barb down here, and that may be easier said than done. I'm going to try and hook it and fish it out. Let's see if I can hook it like this. All right, guys, we got it. You see it? Yeah, that little joker right there, yeah, he'll cause a lot of heartache too if you're not careful. It'll really get you. I don't know if you guys can see that. There you go. It's just a little hose barb that attaches to the fuel line that keeps it from actually falling down into everything. So now what we need to do is we need to feed this hose through the hole in the tank and try and pull it out. So bear with me while I do this as well, because yeah, it's not as easy as what you might think. They do make a tool for this. It's a piece of wire that's stiffer than this piece of aluminum, and I may try and feed this piece of aluminum through just to see if I can do it for you guys, right? For you guys. All right, so you see where I've got that coming through. I've got it coming through right back down there in that little hole. That's where we're going to pull this hose back through, okay? What I did was this piece of yellow hose comes off the primer bulb and is going to go into the carburetor, and the piece of yellow tubing that's coming out of the tank is going into the other side of this primer bulb. And I changed it from a blue to the yellow because it's a tighter fit in the tank, and it will seal in the tank better so that we don't have to use this little barb that I showed you earlier. No worries, it'll work the same, I promise. So now we need to take this hose off the bottom of the carburetor. And sometimes it's easier just to cut these off. So I'm going to use these dikes just to kind of grab a little bit of the edge. I don't want to pinch the hose, the brass part itself, because if you damage that, we're going to be in big trouble. So you see I just cut the hose off. Very simple. This yellow hose is going to attach to the carburetor. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. No?
You got to have one prime carburetor and then a return.
Yeah, so this is the carburetor here. The return's already in the tank. I know it's hard to see, guys, but I'm just hooking this hose back up into here to the primer bulb. So how about we do it this way? The one to the outside of the case is this one from the tank. Help me remember that, Peacock. All right. So here we are. I have to get everything oriented right. Spacer has to go back in. You see I've got this piece of yellow hose attached to the bottom of the carburetor. Black piece of hose slides over the outside of it. You got your two long screws that go into the carburetor itself. You don't want to force them. You just want to take them in nice and gentle. If something doesn't line up, work with it and see if you can get it to come back around. Alright, so we've got one screw back in. Working on getting the second screw back in. And like I said, guys, just keep in mind, you just have to work on it. It will go. Don't try and force it, because if you try to force it, you'll end up breaking something, and that's not going to do anybody any good. Alright, my carburetor's back in, it's tight. I've got to hook my throttle cable back up. Alright, there's my throttle cable. We'll make it work right. There's my two pieces of hose to get up to my primer bulb. I'm going to put this filter back in. You always want to make sure that you replace the filter if you have to take it out. Again, we're not doing that on this one because we just want to make sure that it's going to run first. So now it's just a matter of putting everything back together and trying to prime it and see if it fires.
Outside. Tank is outside.
How you like that? Alright guys, so you put the screws back in. Let's see if I can get you guys back around here. Excuse me there, Peacock. See if I can get you guys back in here so you can see where these go. So these actually go here and here. And we're not down far enough yet. Why are we not down far enough yet? Isn't going down far enough. There we go. All right, guys, it's as simple as that. Everything's put back together. Now all that's left to do is put some fuel in the tank, try and prime it, try and pull it, and we'll get a video of that here in just a second. Right here is the primer bulb. You pump it, and we should see some gas start to flow through, and we do have gas. All right, so we're going to put it on number 1, and we're going to give it a pull and see what happens. We got fire. Got a lighter, huh? Let's see what's going on here. Like it was a good Looks to me like it was a good success. Good job, guys. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.